It was 3:17 in the afternoon on a cold, drizzly Friday in downtown Chicago, when Daniel Vance received the automated email summoning him to Conference Room C on the fourth floor of corporate headquarters. The long carpeted hallway smelled of stale drip coffee, commercial carpet cleaner, and the faint metallic tang of old radiator heat. Daniel, a 49-year-old senior systems infrastructure architect, walked down the corridor with calm, measured steps that reflected over 2 decades of professional discipline. Over his 21 years of continuous service at Apex Dynamics Incorporated, he had walked this exact path hundreds of times for quarterly reviews, architectural design meetings, and critical server deployment briefings. However, on this particular afternoon, the atmosphere inside the facility felt noticeably different. His direct manager had spent the entire morning ducking behind closed office doors whenever Daniel approached, and the executive administrative assistants were conversing in hushed, guarded tones near the break room water dispenser. Daniel recognized the unmistakable signs of a corporate execution long before his fingers touched the cold aluminum handle of the conference room door. When Daniel opened the heavy door, he observed 2 people already seated across a long, highly polished mahogany conference table. On the left side sat a junior associate from the Human Resources Department, holding a thin black vinyl binder and maintaining a stiff expression of artificial sympathy. On the right side sat Bradley Lawson, the recently appointed Chief Financial Officer who had joined Apex Dynamics Incorporated 4 months earlier following an aggressive private equity buyout. Bradley was 42 years old, dressed in a bespoke navy wool suit with polished silk lapels and custom gold cufflinks. His teeth were aggressively bleached to an unnatural white, contrasting sharply with his perpetual, smug corporate scowl. Bradley possessed the polished, impatient demeanor of an executive who evaluated human technical talent solely as line-item expenses to be trimmed for quarterly balance sheet optimization. Bradley did not invite Daniel to take a seat, nor did he offer a professional greeting or extend a courtesy handshake. Instead, he slowly checked his platinum chronograph wristwatch, rested his elbows on the polished table, and cleared his throat with rehearsed authority. Bradley declared that, after a comprehensive operational audit of technical department expenditures, executive leadership had made the decision to streamline core engineering overhead to maximize shareholder value and eliminate redundant technical roles. He asserted that Daniel's position was being eliminated effective immediately as part of an ongoing structural realignment across all regional engineering units. Daniel listened to the entire speech in absolute silence, studying the executive's shallow breathing patterns and mechanical delivery. Over the preceding 24 months, Daniel had personally conceptualized, coded, and deployed the company's proprietary automated payroll architecture. He had spent countless evenings, weekend shifts, and holiday breaks designing an advanced microservice system capable of processing state tax withholdings, healthcare benefit deductions, wage garnishments, and direct deposit transfers for 8,400 active employees across 12 regional operational divisions. When Bradley finished his brief monologue, the human resources representative slid a single printed document across the mahogany table. It was a standardized severance release offering 4 weeks of base salary, in exchange for an absolute waiver of all future legal claims against the corporation, accompanied by the immediate revocation of all company health insurance coverage. Bradley announced that 4 weeks of severance was a generous financial settlement for a non-essential technical role that no longer aligned with the company's forward-looking strategic roadmap. Daniel took a moment to review the text carefully. He recognized immediately that corporate management was executing a direct violation of federal statutory mandates. Under Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 2101, widely recognized as the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, employers maintaining more than 100 full-time employees are legally mandated to provide 60 days advance written notice before initiating large-scale structural layoffs. Bradley had deliberately skipped the mandatory 60-day notice window to artificially compress operating costs for the upcoming quarterly financial report to the board. Rather than raising an argument or expressing vocal frustration, Daniel calmly signed the notice acknowledgement, placed the pen back on the table, and stood up straight. Bradley appeared slightly taken aback by Daniel's absolute composure, having clearly anticipated a desperate plea for reconsideration or an angry verbal confrontation. The human resources associate handed Daniel a plain cardboard box containing his personal desk items, which had already been cleared from his cubicle by private security guards while he was inside the meeting room. Daniel accepted the box, turned around, and walked out of conference room C into the main hallway. As he passed near the secure server room, he crossed paths with Gavin Croft, the lead network technician. Gavin appeared visibly uncomfortable, keeping his eyes fixed on a diagnostic tablet. Daniel paused near the doorway and spoke in a quiet, measured tone. He instructed Gavin to remind executive management that someone would need to manually execute the monthly CRICRAC token key update for the automated payroll daemon before the 26th day of the current month. Gavin nodded absently without processing the technical meaning of Daniel's words, muttering that he would log a note in the internal ticketing queue. What neither Bradley nor Gavin understood was that the automated payroll system Daniel built was protected by a strict custom security handshake. 2 years earlier, when corporate finance had explicitly denied a $12,000 budget request for an enterprise cloud security vault, Daniel had implemented an off-grid authentication service, utilizing his own pre-existing software modules. Under federal intellectual property provisions detailed in Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, Daniel retained exclusive personal ownership of the underlying security code. The system was programmed to perform an automated handshake on the 26th day of every month, requiring a unique cryptographic token generated exclusively by a Pravixk running on Daniel's personal laptop and delivered solely to his private email address. Without that monthly token, the entire automated clearinghouse dispatch engine would execute an immediate lockdown to prevent unauthorized financial tampering. Daniel walked down the elevator bank, exited the building into the afternoon rain, placed his cardboard box in the trunk of his car, and drove home into the quiet evening. As Daniel drove through the rain-soaked streets of Chicago, he reflected on the sheer arrogance of executive leadership. In their desperate rush to cut costs, they had treated a complex enterprise system as if it were a simple commodity that could run indefinitely without human intervention. They had ignored the intricate web of security protocols, API connections, and cryptographic dependencies that held the company's financial operations together. Daniel felt no anger, nor did he feel any urge to seek immediate revenge. He possessed the quiet confidence of a master craftsman who understood every line of code, every database trigger, and every automated script within the system. He knew that the corporate machine would continue to run smoothly for a few short weeks, insulated by the automated routines he had crafted. Until the calendar reached its hard mathematical boundary. Before heading home, Daniel stopped at a favorite quiet diner near the lakefront. As he watched rain droplets trace paths down the window pane, he contemplated the evolution of corporate culture over his 2 decades in tech. Companies used to value institutional memory and foundational craftsmanship. But modern executive suites were increasingly dominated by short-term financial managers who viewed experienced engineers as expensive liabilities. Daniel knew that he had built an elegant, robust solution that protected both the workers and the company's legal integrity. He took comfort in knowing that he had always acted with complete professional integrity, fulfilling every duty required of him while establishing protective safeguards that honored his own intellectual property rights. By the following Monday morning, the corporate atmosphere on the executive floor of Apex Dynamics Incorporated had returned to its routine pace. Bradley Lawson hosted a triumph-filled town hall presentation in the glass atrium, pointing proudly to colorful presentation slides that projected a 12% reduction in engineering overhead for the upcoming fiscal quarter. He assured the assembled vice presidents that the core server infrastructure was fully digitized, self-sustaining, and completely operational without the need for high-salaried senior engineering personnel. Down in the IT department, Gavin Croft was consumed with managing routine employee password resets, printer connectivity issues, and mobile device deployments, completely erasing Daniel's parting advice from his memory. The extensive documentation Daniel had authored over 2 years remained safely stored inside a restricted folder on the internal file server. But the underlying external token generation framework remained entirely off-grid by design. Throughout the following 2 weeks, Daniel embraced his newfound freedom with complete tranquility. He spent his mornings taking brisk walks along Lake Michigan, reading advanced technical journals, and enjoying quiet breakfasts at neighborhood cafes. He did not harbor bitterness or dwell on the corporate disrespect he had experienced. Instead, he treated his termination as a long overdue sabbatical from 2 decades of high-stress corporate engineering. He monitored his private personal email account daily, maintaining an organized inbox while ignoring any informal corporate inquiries. He knew with mathematical certainty that the calendar was progressing toward an inevitable operational bottleneck, and he remained completely prepared for whatever outcome unfolded. On Thursday, the 25th day of the month, the automated payroll processing engine initiated its scheduled pre-processing routines at 9:15 in the morning. Inside the finance division, a junior accountant named Justin Reed logged into the master administrative dashboard to review the upcoming bi-weekly payroll distribution batch. Normally, Justin would observe a bright green verification icon, confirming that the direct deposit routing files for 8,400 employees were fully validated and ready for clearinghouse bank transmission. Instead, he observed a prominent yellow warning indicator flashing next to the automated clearinghouse queue. The system interface displayed a message stating that pre-authorization was pending external token verification. Justin assumed the delay was caused by routine server maintenance or minor network latency. He created a low-priority internal IT ticket titled Routine Payroll System Authorization Delay and returned to reconciling corporate travel expense spreadsheets. Gavin Croft received the support ticket at 11:40 in the morning. Skimming the text quickly while setting up wireless access points in the executive conference suite, Gavin flagged the ticket as low priority and scheduled it for review on Friday afternoon. Meanwhile, deep within the primary server infrastructure, the automated security daemon began executing its scheduled monthly validation protocol. At 5:47 in the afternoon, the server generated an encrypted automated handshake request and dispatched it across the network. The designated destination endpoint was the private personal email address belonging to Daniel Vance. The automated message contained a precise timestamp, a 32-character session identification hash, and a prompt requesting the immediate manual input of the monthly master cryptographic token key. Daniel was sitting in a quiet cafe 5 miles away from corporate headquarters, enjoying a warm cup of dark roast coffee while reading an engineering journal, when his smartphone vibrated in his coat pocket. He retrieved the phone and observed the automated system alert sitting in his personal email inbox. The email stated clearly that the monthly payroll authentication token for Apex Dynamics Incorporated would expire within 12 hours if the required cryptographic string was not submitted to the server. Daniel took a slow, relaxed sip of coffee, set his cup back on the small wooden table, and looked at the flashing notification for a few moments. He did not open the email. He did not click the authentication link. He selected the message, tapped his screen, and deleted the notification permanently from his inbox. He then returned his phone to his pocket and continued reading his journal. As midnight arrived, the internal system clock on the payroll server reached its hard expiration limit. Because no valid cryptographic token was returned to authenticate the outbound clearinghouse files, the security daemon executed its automatic fail-safe protocol. The system sealed the transaction queues, encrypted the routing tables, and entered an immutable security deadlock. The direct deposit instructions for 8,400 employees, representing millions of dollars in earned wages, were completely frozen. The server logged a critical authorization failure and terminated all external administrative access routes. No manual database modification, password override, or a server reboot could bypass the lock without triggering a complete purge of the pending transaction records. The corporation was officially locked out of its own financial engine, and the sole keyholder was fast asleep in his suburban home, inside the dark, silent server room at corporate headquarters. Green diagnostic lights blinked steadily along the server racks, oblivious to the financial catastrophe that had just locked into place. The primary database had executed its security protocol with mathematical perfection, shutting down every automated clearinghouse transfer channel. Outbound payment files were sealed behind AES 25-bit encryption keys that had been generated dynamically during the fail-safe trigger. The system logs recorded a final entry indicating that authentication token validation had failed due to an unreachable external endpoint. No administrative account, root access credential, or database query could modify the frozen tables. The financial engine of Apex Dynamics Incorporated had effectively ceased to exist, waiting for a master token that would never arrive. On Friday morning at 7:15, the quiet environment inside the corporate headquarters of Apex Dynamics Incorporated erupted into total chaos. Across 12 regional branch offices, thousands of employees awoke to discover that their expected biweekly paychecks had not landed in their bank accounts. Within 45 minutes, the Human Resources Department was flooded with hundreds of panicked phone calls and frantic messages from warehouse supervisors, field technicians, software developers, and administrative staff. Single parents reported that their child care payments had failed. Senior sales representatives complained that their mortgage debits were bouncing, and factory line workers declared an immediate work refusal until their wages were deposited. By 8:30 in the morning, the internal corporate communication channels were overflowing with angry posts. Workers shared screenshots of $0 account balances alongside demanding messages questioning executive competence. The receptionist at the main lobby abandoned her desk after receiving dozens of aggressive calls from enraged employees demanding immediate explanations. In a desperate attempt to contain the panic, Human Resources issued a generic email announcement at 9:15, claiming that a minor banking processing error was causing a brief delay and asking staff to remain patient. The insincere statement only magnified employee anger, causing the news of the payroll failure to leak onto major social media platforms and viral online forums. The viral traction of the payroll failure created an immediate public relations emergency for Apex Dynamics Incorporated. Frontline workers began posting short videos on video-sharing platforms, displaying empty banking dashboards alongside bitter commentary about corporate misrule. By 11 o'clock in the morning, regional news outlets began contacting the company's media department, requesting official statements regarding allegations of unpaid labor. Inside corporate facilities, productivity ground to a complete halt as employees gathered in break rooms and hallways to discuss organizing formal strikes if direct deposits were not processed before the close of business. Inside the fourth-floor executive war room, Bradley Lawson was pacing across the floor with a bright red face and a loosened tie. He summoned Gavin Croft into the office and demanded to know why the direct deposit files had failed to transmit to the banking network. Gavin, pale and visibly trembling, sat at the main server terminal and attempted to execute a manual override of the queued payroll batch. Every time he attempted to bypass the system, the terminal monitor flashed a bright red alert window displaying the message, "Master cryptographic key expired. External endpoint unreachable. Transaction queue locked." Bradley pushed Gavin aside, grabbed the keyboard, and aggressively clicked the administrative override button. The system immediately rejected his input, displaying an immutable error confirming that authorization required a valid token dispatched from the whitelisted origin address. Bradley slammed his fist onto the desk and demanded to know where the whitelisted origin address was located. Gavin cleared his throat nervously and confessed that the master token generator was hard-coded to route exclusively through Daniel Vance's personal email account. Gavin explained that when Daniel engineered the system 2 years earlier, executive management had denied funding for an internal enterprise key vault, forcing Daniel to integrate his own pre-existing security architecture. Bradley turned pale as he recognized the full consequence of his cost-cutting measures. The single professional who possessed master cryptographic access to the entire company's payroll system was the senior engineer he had terminated 3 weeks prior without cause, notice, or adequate severance. At 11 o'clock in the morning, Bradley instructed Human Resources to send an urgent email to Daniel's personal address. The message, written in a condescending corporate tone, requested Daniel's immediate technical assistance to resolve a minor operational glitch in exchange for an hourly consulting fee. Daniel read the email on his laptop while having lunch at an outdoor park. He smiled faintly at the corporate double talk, opened a reply window, and typed 8 simple words: "I no longer work there. Best of luck." He clicked send, immediately added Bradley's email domain to his account block list, and closed his laptop. By mid-afternoon, news of the executive blunder had reached the board of directors, and the entire leadership team was sinking into an unprecedented operational catastrophe. As Friday afternoon wore on, executive panic deepened across every department. Finance managers attempted to manually execute bank wires for critical personnel, but the corporate banking portal rejected bulk manual transfers that bypassed automated clearinghouse protocols without executive board approval. Regional managers reported that warehouse workers in Ohio and assembly technicians in Texas had walked off the job, leaving production lines dormant. Internal morale collapsed entirely as employees realized that management had no immediate solution. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the executive suite was filled with red-eyed managers staring helplessly at computer monitors, realizing that their shiny new cost-cutting CFO had managed to disable the company's entire operating infrastructure in less than a month. Over the weekend, the news of the corporate paralysis spread even further. Across tech industry social circles, software architects and network engineers held online discussions analyzing the structural flaw in executive decision-making. Analysts pointed out that modern enterprise software systems were so intricately linked to human expertise that attempting to separate the code from the architect without proper transition protocols was an act of organizational suicide. While executive leadership spent Saturday and Sunday holding futile emergency meetings, Daniel Vance enjoyed a peaceful weekend visiting art galleries and dining with close friends, completely unbothered by the storm raging inside the company he had left behind. By Monday morning, the operational crisis at Apex Dynamics Incorporated had escalated into a full-blown legal and financial nightmare. At 7:48 in the morning, process servers arrived at the corporate headquarters to deliver 7 formal legal complaints filed on behalf of regional employee unions and individual workers. Attorneys representing the workforce alleged severe violations of state wage payment laws, demanding immediate statutory interest penalties, liquidated damages, and mandatory state regulatory audits. Furthermore, legal representatives highlighted that Bradley Lawson's abrupt termination of technical personnel 3 weeks earlier constituted a direct violation of the Federal Warrant Act under Title 29 of the United States Code's Section 2101, exposing the company to massive class action financial liability. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the board of directors convened an emergency video conference. The chairman of the board opened the meeting by demanding an immediate assessment from corporate legal counsel, attorney Stanford Pierce. Stanford delivered a blunt, uncompromising report. He informed the board members that CFO Bradley Lawson had committed an egregious breach of fiduciary duty by eliminating essential technical personnel without conducting a comprehensive risk assessment or securing operational continuity for mission-critical systems. Stanford further clarified that under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, Daniel Vance maintained clear, exclusive legal ownership of the underlying authentication architecture. Any unauthorized attempt by internal IT staff to alter or force access into the encrypted database would corrupt the financial records beyond recovery, causing irreversible bankruptcy. Stanford Pierce emphasized to the board that Daniel had not engaged in any illegal hacking, sabotage, or unlawful system intrusion. Daniel had simply left the corporation upon termination, leaving behind a perfectly functional security engine that functioned exactly as designed. The failure stemmed entirely from executive management's refusal to maintain the external authentication protocol and their reckless decision to sever ties with the sole authorized key holder. Stanford warned the board that pursuing aggressive legal action against Daniel would backfire catastrophically, exposing the company to immediate counterclaims for federal statutory violations and statutory damages. The board members turned their fury toward Bradley Lawson, who sat slumped in a chair in the corner of the war room, soaked in cold sweat. When pressed to explain why he had failed to secure master system access before releasing Daniel, Bradley stammered weak excuses about meeting quarterly expense targets and streamlining overhead. The board chairman silenced him abruptly, ordering Stanford Pierce to open immediate communications with Daniel Vance's legal representative to negotiate emergency recovery terms. Meanwhile, public relations teams tried desperately to suppress the story, but viral posts and insider leaks had already been picked up by national technology news outlets, exposing the corporation's arrogance to the entire industry. Corporate executives attempted to locate Daniel by calling his emergency contacts, eventually reaching his cousin Mason Vance, who operated a boat rental business in Florida. When corporate representatives begged Mason to put Daniel on the phone, Mason laughed heartily, informing them that Daniel was enjoying a relaxing coastal sailing trip with his mobile devices switched to airplane mode. Mason added that Daniel was completely unconcerned with corporate emergency calls from former managers who treated veteran engineers like disposable line items on a balance sheet. By Tuesday morning, internal panic inside Apex Dynamics Incorporated had reached a breaking point. Regional banking partners threatened to revoke the company's commercial credit lines due to defaulted payroll obligations. State labor boards initiated formal investigations into executive management's statutory noncompliance, and major corporate clients threatened to cancel their service contracts unless payroll was fully restored within 24 hours. The board of directors realized they held zero operational leverage. They issued a direct command forcing Bradley Lawson and attorney Stanford Pierce to accept whatever legal terms Daniel Vance's counsel required to restore the payroll system. The financial fallout was spreading rapidly into the company's core commercial relationships. Primary vendors announced an immediate suspension of raw material shipments until corporate credit accounts were cleared, and commercial insurance underwriters delivered formal notices warning that executive liability policies would not cover damages resulting from intentional statutory noncompliance. Bradley Lawson sat alone in his corner office, staring at a barrage of angry emails from institutional investors demanding his immediate removal. The executive who had entered the company with promises of aggressive cost reduction had succeeded only in reducing the enterprise to complete operational paralysis. On Tuesday afternoon at 2:15, attorney Stanford Pierce initiated a formal phone call to Daniel Vance's legal counsel, attorney Victoria Cross. Victoria, a veteran employment litigator, listened calmly as Stanford delivered a humbled request for emergency technical intervention. She informed Stanford that her client was willing to execute a short-term consulting engagement to restore the automated payroll engine, but strictly under non-negotiable legal conditions. 30 minutes later, Victoria transmitted a formal emergency consulting contract to the corporate legal team. The contract specified that Daniel Vance would be retained as an independent master infrastructure consultant for a duration of 6 months. The agreement mandated an immediate, non-refundable retainer payment of $225,000, wired directly into Daniel's personal bank account before any technical work commenced. The contract stipulated that Daniel would work completely remotely on an asynchronous schedule of his own choosing, with zero obligation to attend internal corporate meetings, answer phone calls, or accept direct supervision from executive management. Crucially, the agreement contained a mandatory public accountability clause. Chief Financial Officer Bradley Lawson was required to execute a formal, signed letter of apology acknowledging executive negligence, which had to be permanently pinned to the main page of the corporate intranet homepage for 10 consecutive days. When Bradley read the public apology requirement, He flew into a rage, shouting that he would never sign a document admitting personal failure. Attorney Stanford Pierce stared at Bradley with cold contempt, informing him that if he refused to sign, the board of directors would terminate him for cause within the hour, stripping him of all executive stock options and exposing him to personal civil litigation for breach of fiduciary duty. Realizing his corporate career was completely destroyed, Bradley signed the confession document with a trembling hand. At 11:45 on Wednesday morning, the corporate finance department executed the electronic wire transfer, sending $225,000 directly into Daniel's bank account. At 12 minutes past noon, after receiving written confirmation from Victoria Cross that the funds were fully cleared, Daniel opened a secure terminal application on his laptop while sitting under a shaded umbrella at a coastal resort. He entered 5 precise lines of code, establishing an encrypted connection to the Apex Dynamics server facility and dispatching the master cryptographic token string. Inside the corporate data center, the automated payroll daemon received the validation key, purred to life, and instantly unlocked the transaction queues. Within seconds, the queued direct deposit files for 8,400 employees were transmitted across the automated clearinghouse network, delivering long overdue paychecks to thousands of relieved workers across the country. The automated system performed flawlessly, but the corporate consequences for executive management were devastating. On Friday morning, the board of directors accepted Bradley Lawson's official resignation, ending his corporate tenure in complete disgrace. News of Daniel's brilliant technical victory spread across the technology industry, resulting in multiple lucrative consulting offers from major enterprise firms offering annual compensation packages exceeding $520,000. Daniel Vance had not only secured total financial restitution for his years of dedicated service, but he had also delivered an unforgettable lesson in corporate accountability, proving that true technical expertise will always triumph over arrogant corporate greed. As Daniel relaxed on the sunlit deck of a coastal resort, watching the ocean waves roll against the shore, his smartphone chimed with a new notification. It was a formal executive job offer from a major software conglomerate, inviting him to lead their global cloud infrastructure team with full autonomy and an extraordinary salary package. Daniel smiled, closed the notification, and took a slow sip of chilled fruit juice. He realized that true professional power did not come from corporate titles or executive suits, but from mastery of one's craft and the quiet dignity to let arrogance dismantle itself. For Daniel Vance, justice had not been fought with anger or litigation, but with 5 clean lines of code and the unshakable patience of a man who knew his own worth. The following week, employees logging into the corporate intranet were greeted by the pinned apology letter signed by Bradley Lawson, standing as a permanent testament to the dangers of executive arrogance. The company reorganized its technical management structure, establishing new protocols to ensure that senior engineers were treated with respect and compensation commensurate with their vital contributions. Daniel Vance transitioned into an independent advisory role, choosing his own projects, setting his own rates, and enjoying the absolute freedom he had earned. His story became a legendary case study within the tech community, inspiring thousands of technical professionals to know their value, protect their intellectual work, and never let arrogant management take their expertise for granted.